Mayuk, can you, sorry, Netra, can you pause that music? Hello. Netra, are you there? Like, please pause that music playing in the background. Huh. Okay, guys, it's 7. Let's wait for 5 more minutes and then we'll start the session. Mayuk, do you want to brief them about the previous session?
Okay, okay.
Prakha, you need to download an emulator from Android Studio. Have you done that? No, like you need to go into the SDK manager, or I think it's like virtual device manager, and then you need to download an Android virtual device. You can do that right now. I guess it's around 1.5 GB of download. So you can start it right now. It will complete midway in the session when we'll be running the app. You are on mute, I guess.
Hello everyone. Can you yeah, can you hear me right now? Just give a hands up. Okay. So welcome to session two, right? So in the first session, what we did was we completed like most of the parts of the basics of Dart programming language, and we covered loops, control flows, futures, many other things. But today we are going to start, which is the main thing, which is the uh, which I always said that in the first session only about the widget tree, right? Flutter is nothing but widgets. What are widgets? How to use widgets? How many kinds of widgets are there? And all the building blocks of that particular app. Today, Mohit will take over, and we will be going forward with this. Last class, we were left with something known as enums, something analogous functions. These are also left, but that will be taught on the due course of process. And I have added that things in my Dart file. You can just access it with any of the code editors you have, VS Code or Android Studio, anything. Yeah, so that's the thing. It over to Mohit right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayuk. Okay, guys, so hope you found the previous session on Dart intuitive. And in this session, we'll be diving into Flutter and how you can build some great apps that run on all platforms. So before starting, let me tell you about myself. My name is Mohit, and I've been coding in Flutter since about 1.5 years from now. So what I found is Flutter is very, you can say, fast as compared to React Native, and there's an underlying reason for that. So what Flutter does is Flutter controls every single pixel on the screen, unlike React, which uses something known as platform natives. So if you have coded in React Native before, you know that for different operating systems, React uses something called platform natives, and that is a layer between what is being rendered and what is being coded on your app. So it introduces some lags and some performance depreciations, I must say. So that's where Flutter shines. Flutter controls every single pixel on the screen, and you can even make iOS looking apps on Android using Flutter. Okay, so all that is possible with the help of some, like you, if you know widgets correctly, then you can build UI of as much complexity as you want. Okay, now without wasting any further time, let us dive right into the session. So firstly, what is material design? Have any of you heard about material design? You can just raise your hand. Okay. Material design is a set of design guidelines given by Google. Okay, so it started with Material 1, then Material 2, and right now it is at Material 3. So if I just copy this link and go to the material website, you can see it says m3.material.io. So Material 3 is the latest material design by Google, and you can explore various components of material design by going to components, and you can explore any of the you know actions or communication containers navigation here. Okay, so you may be familiar with the bottom app bar, or you must have seen a top app bar, a floating action button in your apps. So that comes from material design. Cool. Now let us dive right into making a Flutter app. So I would encourage you to open any of your editor. You may be using either VS Code or you may be using Android Studio. So I request you to just open your editor in which you will be making your Flutter app. So yeah, I posted the tutorial for installing Flutter on your system. And for getting started with Flutter, you need either Android Studio or Visual Studio Code. I personally use Visual Studio Code, but if you use Android Studio Code, you can follow this tutorial and there won't be any problem. Okay, so I'm in Visual Studio Code right now, and what I'll do is press Control Shift P, and it will open up this dialog box. Now, if I enter new Flutter project, or yeah, this one, the top of the list says Flutter new project. You can just press enter, and it asks you what Flutter template do you want to have. So in our case, we want to build an application. So I'll just select application here, and now it will ask you what is the directory in which you want to create your application. So I've created a like a folder on my desktop named Flutter. You can just go into that and select it. Now comes naming your Flutter project. So I'll name it my first Flutter app. Okay. Now once you have named your Flutter app, you can press enter, and it will do all the heavy lifting. It will create all the required files for the basic Flutter app. And let me tell you, the basic Flutter app which Google gives you as soon as you create your app is a counter application. So you guys can now connect your phone to your PC and make sure that on the bottom right here, if you click on it, you'll see the list of all the possible target devices you can use. So in my case, I'll be running it on Linux, which is the beauty of Flutter. You can make your target device and your development device same. But in your case, you guys can either run it on a Windows app, or you can use like an Android device for running your app. But like before starting, let me clear out all these comments so that it is easier to read the code. So I'll explain all of this, but let us first run our app and see how it looks and what it does. I'll just delete all these comments from here. In the meantime, you guys can connect your Android phone, and if you haven't already, you can enable USB debugging because that is required for running your apps on your phone. Okay. Yeah. So with the comments out of the way, I'll just run the app. So it will take like a couple of seconds to build the app. Yeah. So it started working. And as you can see, I can freely resize the app as I would with a normal Linux app or a normal Windows app or a normal macOS app. And yeah, so this is the homepage of our application. It has an app bar. In the middle, it has some text and a number is being displayed. And on the bottom, you can see that there is a floating action button, is what we call this. And if you click on it, basically the number right here increments. So in the background, what it is doing is there is a variable, and whenever we press the floating action button, it increments that variable. Correct? Okay. So now let us dive into the code. I'll explain the code to you step by step. Before that, you need to understand some of the object oriented concepts. So if you guys have coded in Java before, you'll be knowing that there is something known as inheritance. Okay. So what inheritance does is, if there is a parent class and then there is a child class, what inheritance would do is it will inherit all the fields and all the functions that the parent class has into the child class. Okay, similar to how inheritance works in real life. Okay, so as you can see, there is a class named my app. Okay, and it is extending what is known as a stateless widget. Okay, so what is state? The $1 million question is, what is state? If you go on and learn Flutter, you'll notice that state management is one of the most important and performance deciding factor in your app. I'll just zoom into the code. I guess it's fine now. Can any one of you confirm? Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I was explaining what is a state. So state is the variable that happens at a particular instant of time. Okay. So for example, this app has something called as a counter. So if the counter is 0 right now, then that indicates the current state. Okay. Let's say we know that state is very important, and stateless widget does not care about the state of your application. Okay. And similarly, stateful widget cares about the state. Okay. So if you edit any of your variables, if you increase them, if you decrease them, then that has to be done inside a stateful widget. Okay. So if you want to reflect the changes that you have made inside your app at any particular instant of time, then you have to use a stateful widget. Okay. Let's move on to the slides. Now, what is a material app? A material app basically implements all the required, you can say, guidelines for a material app. Okay. Material guidelines are implemented by Google, and it would be hard for us to go through all the documentation and see what's the spacing, what's the padding, what's the margin here. So what Flutter team has done is they have given you this handy dandy material app which you can use inside your Flutter applications, and all the basic positions, all the basic sizes would be automatically implemented in the background. So for example, we saw here that we didn't specify that the floating action button should appear here. Okay, that is done by the material app. Okay, let's go. Now, inside a stateful widget and a stateless widget also, there is something known as the build method. Okay, so what build method does is it returns a widget. So you'll ask me now that where is this widget going? Okay, so we know that every app in Dart, or for that case even in Flutter, starts with a main function. Okay, inside the main function you can see that I have called another function named run app. And if you hover over this run app function, you can see that it accepts a widget. Okay, so that's where this return statement is going. Cool. Any doubts till now? You guys can raise your hand if everything is clear. Or if I'm going too fast, you can just comment. Okay, let's move on. So, what is a material app? Now, let's move on to a scaffold. So, a scaffold is also a widget. Okay, you can see that it implements the basic material design layout structure. Okay, and you can imagine it just like a ground in which you can lay your widgets. You can lay them on top of each other, left to right to left, anything that you want. Okay, you can create a column of widgets, you can create a row of widgets, you can place a widget on the bottom right, you can even stack them on the top of each other. Okay, so there is even a widget called as stack, which you can use to place widgets on top of each other. Okay, now if we just go through the lot of text written here, we'll know that it is typically not necessary to nest scaffolds. So what is the, like, my intention of writing this down is, in a material app you can have various scaffolds. Okay, for example, uh, it is quintessential for you to develop a multi-screen application. Okay, there are I mean, there is a limited utility with a single screen app, so you need multiple screens. So how even do you implement these multiple screens? So what you do is, at the top of your widget tree, you pass a material app, and on the bottom you keep different scaffolds. Okay, so you have different canvases which you can display at any point of time in your app. Okay, so I may have a screen for, let's say, dialing a phone number, and another screen for searching through the contacts. So basically in Flutter, these different screens are different scaffolds. Okay, and you can edit these scaffolds to your liking. You can place a floating action button in one, and you can keep the other one empty, or display a list in some other one. You can even make a searchable list in some other. Okay, yeah. So that is all about material design. Now, Apple also has their own design guidelines, which they call human interface guidelines. Okay, so if I just copy this link and go into my web browser, yeah. So just like Google calls their their design language as material design, Apple calls it human interface guidelines. So you can just go to any of the tabs here and see what are the guidelines. Similar case, if we were to implement all these guidelines by ourselves, it would be a humongous task, and we wouldn't be able to build apps quicker. So what Google has done is, they have implemented something known as a Cupertino app, just like a material app, and they have basically given all these guidelines embedded into the Flutter SDK. Okay, what is a Cupertino page scaffold? Just like the scaffold in our material app, we have Cupertino page scaffolds. So if you guys have an iPhone, you can see that it also has multiple pages or multiple screens that is implemented in Flutter using a Cupertino page scaffold. Okay, you can read all of this. I'll just upload them on the group, and I'll maybe put them in the description of the live stream. You can go and read all of this. Okay. So now let's finally code an application, edit the application, and see how can we build apps using Flutter. Yeah, so I've explained this to you. The material app goes to the run app method in the main function. Okay. Yeah. So open up your favorite IDE, Android Studio or Visual Studio Code, and we'll just move on to coding our app. So what I'll do is I'll delete all of this and we'll code a Flutter app from the ground up. Okay. So firstly, for using a material app, you need to import the material.dart file. So what I'll do is I'll write import, and then Flutter gives me auto completion. I can just select the file that I want. In my case, it's material.dart and move on. Okay. Then uh, a Flutter app, or for that case, a Dart app also starts with a main function. So I'll write void main, and then here I need to run my app. Okay. So I'll type run app, and inside this, I need to pass what is known as a widget. Okay. So as I told you, there are two types of widget: stateless and stateful widget. What I'll do here is I'll create a stateless widget. Okay. So I'll not change the variables inside that state. I'll maybe display a string inside that. Okay. So to create a stateless widget, you just type STLESS. And if you now click enter, the Flutter plugin or the Flutter extension inside VS Code does all the boilerplate code writing for you, and you can just name the widget. Okay, so I'll maybe name it homepage. Okay, and inside this run app method, I'll pass the homepage. So now at this point of time, if I run the app, it would give me an error. Okay, so I'll just reload this. Yeah. So as you can see, this app is returning a placeholder. Okay. So a placeholder looks something like this. It covers the entire area available to it. And it's not particularly looking very good at this point of time. And what I'll do is I'll pass it a material app. Okay. So a material app has different, as you can say, fields or uh, that you can change, okay, to your liking. So to view all of them, all you do is press Control and space. Okay, so you'll see that all of these fields or properties you can edit. Okay, there is a title here, there is a theme here, there is something called as home. Okay, so home is basically what you get on the screen. Okay, so inside the home property, I'll pass in a scaffold. Okay, so basically I want to put some widgets onto my material app, and for that I'm passing a scaffold. Scaffold also has a bunch of properties, you can say, and to view them again you can press the control and space bar at the same time. You can see it has an app bar, it has a background color, a body, a bottom navigation bar, bottom sheet drawer, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so the power of customization is with you. You can change each and every uh, aspect of your application to your liking. So what I'll do right now is I'll display a simple app bar. So for displaying an app bar, you need to pass an app bar widget. Okay. Inside the app bar widget, I'll just write a title, which would be a text widget, and inside that, I'll write, let's say, my first Flutter app. Right now, it's giving me an error. It says the constructor being called isn't a const. So what Flutter did is it automatically or added a const here, and I can just remove it and the error will go away. Okay, so let's see what is the status of our application. So as you can see, the text that we entered here is appearing right here. Okay, so this was the app bar we wrote, and one great feature in Flutter is hot reload. Okay, so let's say I don't like this text and I want to change it. Let's say I want to write Flutter is awesome. So do I have to go through the process of building the app once more? No. You can just hit Control S. It will automatically save the application and the changes would be reflected here. How cool is that? You can, change everything and just hit Control S. The changes would be reflected. If you have a background in native Android development, then you know that if you make any changes, then you have to rebuild your app, and that takes like a couple of seconds. So down the line, Flutter saves you a lot of time. Okay, okay. Let's move on with our application. Now, what I'll do is inside the scaffold, I have a property named body. Okay, so body is the actual widgets or the list of widgets which is being displayed. So what I'll do is I'll just pass a simple text widget. Inside the text widget, I'll write like a basic text, like thanks for attending this GTS event. Okay. Now again, if I hit Control S, the changes would be instantly reflected inside my app. Okay. So as you can see, the text is not really readable right now, but you can see a small piece of text is appearing right here on the top left corner. Okay, which is thanks for attending this GTS event. What if I need to bring this text in the center? You guessed it, there is another widget known as the center widget. So to wrap this text widget inside the center widget, you can just press the control and dot key at the same time. This will give you this pop-up, and inside this, you can just choose rep with center. Now, if I save this, you can see the text appears in the middle. Okay, so that's the basic material app and scaffold working. Let's explore some of the widgets that we have in Flutter right now. So there is a widget named container. So what is a container? So container combines several widgets, and you can change the size, the color, the positioning of a container to your liking. So for example, if you need to display like a rectangle in your application somewhere, and on top of that you need to display an icon, you can use a container. Okay, so you can see that the container first surrounds the child with padding. Okay, and then applies the additional constraint. Apart from that, the last paragraph is very important. If you are building UI, you must know these points, because while basically debugging your UI, you will encounter some issues, and if you don't know these, it would be very hard for you to basically debug your app. Okay, what it says is containers with no children try to be as big as possible unless the incoming constraints are unbound. So basically, what it is saying is if you have a container and it has no children, okay, it has no child, it has no widget with children, it will try to be as big as possible. So let me demonstrate this point to you. Suppose inside the body, I'll just remove this center widget. I have a container. Okay, I'll not specify a child to this container, and I'll just give it a color red. So you specify a color using a class called colors dot red. So what it will do is it will bring the colors class, and from that it will choose the value of red color. Okay, so now let me save it. So as you can see, there was no child inside the container. So what it did is it took all the possible space it had. Okay, so there was no other widget besides the container. So it took all the available space on the screen. What if I give it a child? Let's say I give it a child of text, and inside the text I write the same string, this, or thanks for attending this GTS event. Okay, so as you can see, I have added a text here which says thanks for attending this GDS event. And what happens if I save this? So as you can see, the container has shrinked down to its child. Okay, so that's what this slide says. Uh, Containers with children size themselves to their children. Okay, so that was the demonstration right there. And as always, you can specify height and width to a container. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just remove the properties of this container. Firstly, I'll give it maybe a width of 200 and then a height of 200. Okay, so it's a square basically, and I'll give it a color. Let's say I give it a color cyan. Okay, now if I save this, you can see a square of width 200 and height 200 is being displayed on the screen. What happens if I give it a child right now with 200 and 200 width and height? I've mentioned it. So I'll give it a child text, and I'll mention thanks for attending this GDS event. Now if I save this, you can see the child adjusts to the size of the container. So this is, you can say, the preferred behavior of a container. It would not be very good if we have specified the width and height, and the container is taking up all the space of the screen or shrinking down to the size of its child. Okay. In the case that we have manually specified the width and height, the container should stick to that. Okay. So it's pretty basic. You can refer to all of this, you can say, material here. Now comes the size box. So basically, it's a box with some size. You can specify the height, you can specify the width, but you can't basically specify all the properties which a container has. Okay, so that's the difference between size box and a container. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll make a row or a column right now. You don't have to worry about what is a row or a column. I'll explain that. But right now, I'll give it a column with some children. Okay. So what is a column? A column is basically some things displayed on top of each other. Okay. So that makes a column. Okay. Inside the column, I have some children. Okay. So I can give it multiple children. I can give it 20 containers. I can give it 5 containers. I can give this some text widgets. So right now, what I'll do is I'll give it some containers. Okay, this is the first container. This is the second container. And inside this container, let us give it a height of maybe 100 and a width of 100. Same for this container. I'll give it a height of 100 and a width of 100. Cool. So I'll give this, the top one, a color of green, and the bottom one a color of, let's say, red. So now if I save this, you can say you can see that two containers are displayed on top of each other. The top one being of a color green and the bottom one red. Cool. So what should I do if I want to basically separate them? Okay. So I want a certain size in between these two widgets. So what I'll do is I'll use a sized box. Okay. I can use a container with white color, and it will basically be indistinguishable from the background, and it will give me an illusion that there is some space. But generally, we use a sized box. Okay. So it would be easier for someone else reading the code to understand that this person has given a size between these two containers, basically. Okay. So I need to separate these two boxes. So I'll give this size box a height. Okay. So I'll give it a height of maybe 20. Now if I save this, you can see that some space is there between these two containers. Similarly, if I change this to a row and comment out this size box for now, you'll see two widgets are displayed left and right. Now what if I need to separate them again? I'll include a size box, but this time I'll give it a width. Okay. So as you can see, a size box of 20 is there between these two containers. So that's all for sized box. Now let's move on to the center widget. Basically, we have covered this, but I'll again show you what the center widget is. So right now I have a row, but that row is uh, at the top left. So now if I want to bring that into the center? Obviously, I'll wrap that with a center widget. So as you can see, the center widget basically brings any of its child into the center of the screen. Okay. Now comes padding. So what is the difference between a margin and a padding? Okay. So I'll explain you. Padding is the area which separates the boundary from its contents. Okay. Padding is the area that separates the boundary from its contents. Now, what is a margin? Margin is the space or the area that separates the boundary from other boundary. Okay. So let's say I have two widgets. Okay. And I need to give them some space. Okay. I need to space them out a little bit. So I'll give them a margin. But if I have a container and inside the container, I have some text. Okay. So how would I separate the text and the container? I would use a padding. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. What I'll do is I'll give this container a child, basically a text widget. And inside that, I'll again write thank you for attending this GDS event. Now, if I save this, you can see the text appears inside this container. Now, what if I gave this a padding? It will separate the boundary of the container, which is the green container, and the text which is being displayed inside it. Okay. So inside the padding, what you do is you use the edge insets class. Okay. So it has a constructor called edge insets. You can use that, or if you want to manually give all the you can say the values for padding, you can use this from LTRB, which is left, top, right, and bottom. You can use that, but for now I'll use the all. Okay. Inside this, you can pass a double value. So I'll just give this maybe 2 for now. Or let's keep it a little prominent. I'll give this 10. Okay. So as you can see, the text was being displayed a little differently before and now. Okay. Let's say I increase the size a little bit so that the effect is prominent. Okay, I'll increase this to 500. As you can see, the top of the container and the text is at a certain space right now. What if I increase the padding? Let's say I increase it to 50 or 100. So as you can see, the text is a little down. Okay, so you can adjust this padding. Also, container has something known as margin. So I already explained you what is margin. Margin separates this widget from another widget beside it. Okay, let's revert back all the changes we made. Yeah, let's move on. A column. So we already use a column, but a column is a widget that displays its children in a vertical array. So basically on top of each other. Okay. So there are certain properties which you need to keep in mind regarding a column. Okay. So a column has something known as the main axis alignment and a cross axis alignment. Cool. What is main axis alignment? So if you guys imagine, the main axis of a column is a line running from top to bottom. Okay, so basically the y-axis, if you keep it in a plane. What is the cross-axis alignment of a column? Cross-axis alignment of a column runs from left to the right. Okay, so basically the x-axis, you can say. And you can give the main axis alignment or the cross axis alignment some values, and it will accordingly alter the way in which those children, those widgets inside a column are being displayed. So let us apply all this theory into our little application we have here. So I'll retain these two containers I have, but instead of a row, I'll use a column. I'll save it. The containers appear on the top of each other. Now what I'll do is I'll type main axis alignment, and inside the main axis alignment, you can see you can give them various values, which is center, end, space around, space between, space evenly, and start. So by default, if you hover onto main axis alignment, it says that it is main axis alignment dot start. Now what if I give it main axis alignment dot end? The widgets will fly down to the bottom of the screen. Okay. What if I change it to center? They will come in the center of the screen. What if I give it space around? So you can see every container has a particular space beneath and above it. Okay. What if I give it space between? All the space basically shrinks into the in between the two widgets, you can say. What if I give it space evenly? So space evenly subtracts the available space. Sorry, it basically does is it subtracts the space taken by the column from the available space, and it then divides the space evenly. Okay, so on the top, in the middle, and the bottom, the space will be equally divided. So let's say this is some quantity x, then this will also be x, and this will also be x. Okay, so that's what a column is, and how you can change the way in which the widgets are being displayed onto your screen. Similarly, uh, the row widget also uses main axis alignment and cross axis alignment. But the main difference is the row widget has the main axis alignment running from the left to the right. Okay, so basically the main axis and the cross axis alignments are switched between row and column. For a row, the cross axis alignment would be running from the top to the bottom, which is basically the y axis. Okay, so let me use a row here. Now if I save this, you can see the widgets are displayed from left to the right. And as always, you can hover over main axis alignment and it will give you the default value it uses. So right now it is main axis alignment dot start. So main axis alignment dot start looks something like this. I'll just go through all the main axis alignments. Main axis dot alignment dot end looks something like this. Similarly, dot space around, okay, dot space between, and dot space even. Okay, so you have like maximum control over how the widgets are being displayed on your screen. It's not like you create a row and now you cannot edit how the widgets are being displayed onto your screen. Okay, so that's about the column and the row. um, a little homework for you guys. I would really appreciate if you guys find out the difference between a column and a list view. Okay, so let me give you a little hint. What would happen if I basically created a column which has a size greater than the size of my screen? Would it scroll? Would it not scroll? If it doesn't scroll, then what happens? Does it overflow? Okay, so these things you guys please find out on your own. Obviously, I'll tell you the correct answer in your next class, but till then, you guys have to learn about list view by yourself. Okay, so based on that question, the next you can say widget is single child scroll view. So as the name suggests, single child scroll view will be a box in which a single widget can be scrolled. Okay, so let me just use the single child scroll view. So I'll delete this row right here and I'll say single child scroll view. And the single child scroll view accepts a widget as form of child. What I'll do is I'll give it a container, and inside the container I'll give it a width of let's say 100 and a height of 100. Additionally, I'll give it a color. Let's say I give it a color of amber. So a single container is displayed at the center of the screen. Okay. What if I increased the size or the width? Okay. So let's say I gave it a, a very large value of let's say 1500. So what happens is it doesn't overflow. So one great thing in Flutter is if any of your widget overflows from the screen or goes beyond your screen, then a little caution bar is displayed, like stripes of black and yellow are displayed wherever your widget overflows. So because I've put them in a single child scroll view, they aren't overflowing. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll maybe wrap this with a row and add another container so that you guys can see the scroll behavior. I'll give this a color, red. Okay. Now I'll change the width. I'll give this 500. I'll give this 500 too. So as you can see that the widget overflows from the screen. Cool. So that is the thing about Flutter. It allows you to easily debug your UI. In case you are facing any issues, you can notice them and fix them right away. Okay, so that's about the single child scroll view. I'll remove this. Okay. Yeah, let's move on to the next widget. So the next widget is text widget. We have already used the text widget a couple of times now. So it is basically a run of text with a single style. Okay. So single style means you have a fixed font, you have a fixed font color. If you want to choose the font weight, then that also will be fixed in a single run of text. So inside a text widget, if you want to maybe display some parts bold and some other parts italic, you can't do that. Okay. You need to give it multiple text widgets for that. Okay. So the text widget displays a string of text with a single style, and the string might break across multiple lines or might all be displayed on the same line depending on the layout constraints. So if you remember, we mentioned a text widget inside a container, and when we change the padding of the container, we saw that the text automatically comes on to another line. Okay, so you don't have to do the heavy lifting of configuring all the line breaks inside your text. Flutter automatically does that for you. Okay. Apart from that, the style argument inside the text is optional. Okay. If you want to change the maybe the text size, the font size, or the font color, or the font weight, you can give it a style. Okay. So I'll demonstrate that right now. Let's say I give this a text. Let's write a simple hi just right now. And now I'll give it a style. Okay. So style, if you hover over style, you'll see that it accepts a text style widget. Okay. Remember, everything in Flutter is a widget. So you write text style, and inside that, you can give it various properties. Okay. So again, control and enter gives you all the properties that it accepts. So there is font weight, there is font size, there is font style also. Okay, font features, font family. If you want to change the font, there is decoration also and color also. But first, let me just save it without giving it the style, and let us see how the text looks. Basically, a single block of text here. So it's not really readable right now. So what I'll do is I'll give it a style. I'll pass the text style, and I'll now give it a font size. Okay. Now let's say I give it a font size 50. Yeah. Now it is readable. Okay. Apart from the font size, you can also give it a color. Okay. So I'll give it colors dot. Let's say red is not really readable. I'll give it blue. Okay. So as you can see, the text color is changed to blue. Then I can also give it a font style. Now, how do you mention a font style? Use the font style class. Okay. So font style class gives you a normal font style and an italic font style. So I'll just give it italic, and as you can see, the text is italic. And what if I want to make it a little bolder so that it is easier to read? Or if I want to emphasize the text in some manner, then I'll give it a bold, a font weight parameter. Okay. So now I'll write font weight. And how do you mention the font weight? Again, using the font weight class. Okay. So there is bold, there is normal, and then there are different weights. Okay. So the maximum is 900 and the minimum is 100. I'll normally choose bold. As you can see, the text is bold right now. So that's about it for the text widget. Now let us move on. Let's see what's the next widget. It's an image widget. So many a times you need to display some images in your app. Okay, so you are making a, let's say, YouTube clone, then you need to display the thumbnail, which is basically an image. So that's where the image widget comes into play. So image widget displays obviously an image inside your app, and there are several constructors which are provided to you. Okay, so one is images.asset. So what images.asset does is it basically uses an asset bundle using a key. So if you have an asset bundle, which we maybe will talk about in our upcoming sessions, then you can mention that, or you can get the image from network. Okay, many a times you need to get the image from the network from a URL, and then you need to display it. So Flutter automatically handles all the API calling or all the network calling that is there, and it will wait for the image to load. In the meantime, it will display a placeholder, simple placeholder. You can also edit what placeholder you want. Uh, in the meantime, the image is coming to your application. You can also use an image from a file. Okay, so basically, if you added a file onto your PC, then you can also use that if you have imported it into your project. Okay, but for that you need to edit the pubspec.yaml file. I'll show you just now. So there's a file called pubspec.yaml, and beside that you can see there are various commented parameters. One of them is assets. So if you need to include images, what you'll do is you'll just uncomment this control slash, and you mention the path or the directory of your application. I'll just comment it right now. Yeah. Okay. So you can see that the supported formats for images are JPEG, PNG, uh, GIF or GIF, whatever you call it, WebP, animated images. So basically all the popular formats that are out there. Next one is an icon. So you guys must have encountered a list of material icons. Okay. Okay. I'll maybe show you all the material icons that are out there. Yeah. So as you can see, if you go to fonts.google.com/icons, you'll get all the material icons that are out there. Okay. And all these icons are imported automatically whenever you install Flutter. Okay. So if I go to my app, and instead of this text, what if I use an icon? Okay. So let me just delete this. Okay. Now I'll give it an icon. Okay. So this is how you display an icon, and inside this you need to choose which icon you want to display. Okay, so how will you access all the icons that are there in Flutter? You'll use the icons class. So I'll say icons dot, and then you'll get a list of all the icons that are present. As you can see, this is a very long list, because apart from the normal icons that you also have some variations of each icon. Okay, you have different styles, you have outline, you have filled. Okay, so you can see, if I say icons dot, this gives me for ABC outline, ABC rounded, ABC sharp. Okay, so that's why this is a long list. And let's say we want to display the refresh icon. So I'll mention this and I'll save it. As you can see, a little icon is displayed right here. And obviously, for an icon, I can give it a size. So the icon was not really visible before this. Now, if I give it a size, you can basically alter the size of the icon. Okay, so I'll maybe give it 200. You can see the icon is much more visible now. So that's all about the icon class. So one package uh, I'll recommend is uh, there is a package named Awesome Icons or something like that. So it basically expands upon the pre-built icons that are there in Flutter. Okay, because in many applications I found that material icons do not suffice. So like material icons do not have all the social icons like the Facebook icon or the Twitter icon. Then you can get them with that package which I mentioned. So next up is a card. So if you have ever used an Android application, you would notice that it is basically filled with cards. Okay, so card is basically a material design card, and it's a panel in which you can display some text, some images, and it is elevated. It gives a feeling that it is elevated from the backdrop. Okay, so that's what a card is. Again, we can easily use a card just by giving the center widget a child of card. Okay, and inside the card we see that there are many properties: a child property, color, elevation, margin, shape. and- okay, so I'll give it a child, let's say text. Inside the text I'll write this is a card. Now if I save this, it's not really visible right now, but there is some shadow which surrounds this card. Let me increase that shadow real quick. So I'll type elevation 50. Now, as you can see, there is a shadow right here. Okay, so that's what a card is. You can give it an elevation. Okay, let's give it a container so that the card is visible. I'll give it a height. Okay, height of, let's say, 100 and a width of 100. If I save this, you can see that there is a white card in the middle, and it has some shadow beneath it. Okay, so on the bottom and on the right, you can see there is some kind of separation between the background and the foreground. So that's what a card is. You can always display images, text, or any other type of widget, basically any widget inside a card, by like basically passing into the child argument. Okay, yeah, let us move on to the next widget that we have. This is a list style. So list style is similar to card, but it doesn't have elevation. Okay, and you can also add some actions or let me say icons on the leading or the trailing ends of a list style. So you must have seen the contact types. If you ever use the Android contact application, what it has is you get a name, and before the name you get a little icon. Okay, so that is an avatar icon, and inside that you get the maybe the first letter of the contact. Yeah, so that's what a list style is. You can also include some buttons at the start or the end of a list style. Okay. You can basically go on to the Flutter documentation if you want to see how these widgets are implemented. So I'll show them to you right now. You can go to flutter.dev, and then you can go to docs, and inside that you can basically see, or you can go to showcase. uh, yeah, just a second. Yeah, you can go on to the widget index, and then you'll see all the widgets that are there inside Flutter. This is not a comprehensive list by any chance, but It's basically a list giving you the most commonly used widgets. Okay, so we already saw what is a text, what is a container. You can also use align to align your widgets. So you can go here and you can see what all the widgets have to offer. Okay, let's move on to the next widget that we have. So the next widget is buttons. Obviously, if you want to interact with your app in any way, if you want to do some actions, if you want to log in, if you want to log out, if you want to refresh some data, then you need some buttons. Okay, so there are three types of buttons as of Flutter 3.0: the text button, the elevated button, and the outline button. You can see the preview of all of them, and basically what they do is they also take some child and they display the child inside a button. Okay, so instead of the card, I'll swap it with a button. Okay, so there are different types of button, as I told you: text button, elevated button, outline button. For now, maybe I'll use a elevated button. Okay, inside the elevated button, you pass in a child. Okay, it's giving me an error right here. So you need to give the button an action which is to be performed whenever it is clicked. So that is done by giving it the argument on pressed. So right now I'm keeping it empty. So this function body is empty right now. So nothing will happen basically when I click the button. But for now, for demonstration purposes, let's give it a text. Press this button. Now, if I save this and I go into my app, you can see there is this beautiful button which follows all the material guidelines. So if you click and hold on this, you can see a splash going from the center to the sides. You can even change the style of this button using the button style class. You can also mention what happens when you long press this button, or what happens when you scroll over it. Okay, so that's about the button class. You can explore the um, text button and the outline button yourself. Okay, I'll link all the resources in the description or in the group. Next is the app bar. App bar widget we have already used in our application. As you can see here, we have given it a text. Now you can also give the app bar some leading widget. You can also give it some actions. So basically actions are the uh, three dot menu or the search icon that you see in applications like WhatsApp. Okay, you can also give it some shadow color, surface color. You can also provide the shape or a background or a foreground color too. Okay, so what's given in the slides. So an app bar consists of a toolbar and potentially other widgets. So uh, a tab bar may be there. So a tab bar is used to basically switch between various tabs which you may have on a single screen. Okay. So for example, if you are making a kind of application which displays a book or the information about a book, then when you click on a book, you can see one tab which displays the basic information, and another tab which displays the contents of the book. So basically the index. So you can have that in an application. So also you have a pop-up menu button, which we call it the three dot menu. So that is sometimes called the overflow menu. Okay. So app bars are typically used in the scaffold.appbar property. So what this is a app bar inside a scaffold. Okay. So typically the app bars are displayed here, but obviously you can use them anywhere you want because it's basically a widget. You can pass it anywhere. And that's about it for app bar. Let's move on to the next widget that we have is a floating action button. So if you open WhatsApp on any Android device, you'll see that a green colored button appears on the bottom right. So that button is basically called a floating action button. And you can link any quick action that you want inside the floating action button. So for a chat application, it may be quick chat, or for an application which displays some stock market data, you can just link it with refreshing the data. Okay. So now let us use the floating action button inside of our scaffold. So inside the scaffold, there is a parameter named floating action button. Okay, which uh, accepts a widget. Okay, so I'll include that. So floating action button, and if you hover over floating action button, you'll see it accepts a widget, and you can give it any type of widget. But for it to look clean and follow material design guidelines, I'll use the floating action button constructor. So there are various constructors for a floating action button. You can use a small floating action button, a large floating action button, or an extended one, or basically a normal one. So firstly, let us see how the normal one looks like. And similar to a button, it also allows you to give an on-pressed argument. So basically a function. What happens when you click on the floating action button? Right now, I'm keeping it empty. Okay, and inside the child of this floating action button, I'm giving it an icon. Let's say icons dot add. So now if I refresh it, you can see a floating action button appears right here on the uh, bottom right of the app. What would happen if I changed it to a small floating action button? You can see the size decreases. What if I want a large floating action button? You can see we can use the large constructor. And what if I wanted an extended floating action button? So what it does is it gives me an error and it says I need a label. Okay, I need to give it a label. I give it a child already, and there was no parameter named child. So what I'll do is I'll remove this child and I'll give it a label. So label is a text widget, and inside the text widget I'll write extended. Okay, and it also wants an icon. Okay, so I'll give it an icon. Okay, so icons dot add. I'll save this, and now as you can see, the classic extended floating action button is displayed here. Nothing happens because we didn't mention what happens when we press the floating action button, but you can always uh, do like print a statement. For example, if I print something onto the console, which you learned in the last class, how you can print something on the screen. So here I'll just write uh, floating action button pressed. So now if I bring up my terminal and my app at the same time, let me save it first. Okay. Now if I press this, you can see it prints floating action button pressed onto my console. So that's about it for the floating action button. Let's move on to the next widget that we have. So basically, I'll give you a link which will forward you onto a YouTube playlist called uh, Widget of the Week. So what Flutter team does is every week they release a video in which they explain what a widget does in short and how you can implement it in your app. Okay, so you can obviously binge watch all of them right now, but I would not recommend you to do that. So let us move on to the next part of our tutorial, which is networking. Okay, but before that, I would like to show you an app which I made for this session. So yeah, let me run it real quick. Yeah. So as you can see in this application, I have implemented an app bar, like a floating action button with a plus icon inside it. And inside this, there is a widget called list view. So I told you to search about list view before, so you can see what a list view is. And what this app basically does is you can add your notes. So let's say I type here, this is a note, then you add it, you add another note. Okay, so you can add various notes inside your application and they will come uh, beneath each other, so they'll keep adding. But what if you need to delete one of them? So what you'll do is you'll long press it and then you choose the delete option, so it will go away from the list. So what I want from you guys is just study the code of this application. I'll give the GitHub link to this after the session, and you can basically see what widgets are implemented in this. So as you can see, there's a alert dialog, there is a text button, and there is also a scaffold, an app bar, a list view, and inside the list view we have a list type. So every note here is a list type. Okay, so you can explore this project. I'll give the link after the end of this session, and let us move on to networking. So we are a little short of time right now, and I have a lot of things to cover. So I'll just walk you through what networking is and what you need to do, and I'll give you a code lab or a cookbook which you can follow. And basically, it's very simple. You just need to read through it, and it's a step-by-step cookbook. You can implement a full-fledged application which gets some data from the internet and displays it onto the screen. Cool. So let me just walk you through what networking is and how you can get data from the internet. Okay, let's start. So every app needs to communicate with a web server. Okay. Generally, the server returns data in a format known as JSON. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Okay. If you open up the DevTools in your browser, you can see many get, post, update, or delete requests are being made while you do something on a website. Okay, so basically there are four types of request. There is get, there is post, there is update, and there is delete. Okay, so when you get request a server, you get back some data in form of a JSON generally. Okay, and JSON looks something like this. Okay, now you'll say, I've got the data from the internet, but it's not really useful to me because if I display this onto my screen, the user would not be able to read it correctly, or it is not really presentable right now. What you want to do is you want to store this data in some variables. Possibly you make a class for every type of data. You make a class for every user. You make a class for any type of book data that you get. And then you can access the data from that class and display that onto your screen. Okay. So in this example, inside the JSON object that we have here, it contains email. So what I'll do is I'll make a model class. Okay. So a model class is basically a class which contains every type of data a particular thing has. For example, if I create a user, the user has a name and an email. So what I'll do is I'll create a class and I'll give it a final string name and a final string email. Okay. But before that, you need to extract the name from the JSON object and the email from the JSON object. So that is done by the JSON decode function from the Dart convert library. So it automatically interprets the JSON file and stores that inside the classes that you have created or the model class that you have created. You can also access the data without creating a model class. So here I have mentioned what is the syntax for doing that. So basically you have a map. So basically there are many collections in Dart. There is a map, there is a set, there is a list. Okay, there is a any type of collection that you have used in Java or C++ is also there in Dart also. Okay, so there is a map, and I have made the map of a string and a dynamic data type. So basically, if a string comes into the name, it will take up the type of string. If a number comes into the dynamic data type, it will convert into an integer. So that's what the dynamic here stands for. So dynamic user, and after that, I pass the JSON string that I've received from the server in the JSON decode function. So it will store the data in the user map. After that, you can access the name and the email with this format. Okay. So user map, and then inside the map, you give it a key. Okay. So map is basically a key and a value pair. Key and a value pair. I want a name, which is a key. I get the value of the name. Okay, John Smith. Similarly, if I need to get the email from the user map, I can give it a email key and I'll get the value of it, john@example.com. Now let's move on and uh, let's see how you can encode that JSON into decode that JSON into usable classes. So what would happen if you don't basically make model classes? So if you don't make model classes, you miss out on some of the core features of Dart, uh, which are compile time exceptions or auto completions or type safety. Okay. So because the compiler does not know you have an integer with the ID, it cannot make some tests on that particular data. Okay. Because it is dynamic right now. It will convert to at the runtime. Okay. So you miss out on various core features of the language, and you can solve that by using model class. So inside the model class, same as before, I've given it a string of name and a string of email. Apart from that, there is a constructor which basically sets the name and email. Uh, Apart from that, there is a from JSON constructor. So what it does is it gets the JSON map, and from the JSON map, it assigns the name and the email variable to the class fields. So here you can see the type of name is already a string and the type of email is already a string. So right now, the type of name and email are fixed, and the compiler can make checks. For example, if you assign a number uh, to this string called name, then it will give you an error, similar to what we did in the last class. Okay, so we basically uh, created a variable, give it a string, and then we tried to assign it another type. So it was giving an error. So here also, if you do this, you will get an error. But if you use the simple JSON decode, you'll not get any errors, and it may lead to some faulty code. So that's the solution of it. And here I have shown how you can access the objects that you create using a model class. Okay, you can basically type user.name and it will give you back the name, or user.email, it will give you back the email. Okay, yeah. So as I told you, I was anticipating this would happen, and many things were left out due to time limit. But I will give this link in the Meet chat or in the YouTube live stream, and you can basically use this to explore more about networking. Um, it may be possible that I share another application which demonstrate this networking concepts to you, and obviously, don't stop learning here. You can always go on to this link, which is flutter.dev/learn, and you can explore Flutter in detail. So this is a beautifully made documentation, I would say. So step by step, they've told you what you can do, and you can go on to the level that you want. If you have covered all the beginner concepts, then you can go on to the intermediate, and after that, advanced. Yeah, so basically that's all for this session, and hope you guys attend the upcoming sessions, and you guys can interact with us um, through the community group that we have, and you can also ask the doubts in the comment section down below. Okay, that's it for this session. I'll give you guys goodbye right now, and thank you for attending.